Welcome back to another heartfelt and insightful episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart, the podcast that dives deep into the essential conversations around mental health and the power of support. Today's topic is one that touches the hearts of parents, caregivers, and frankly, anyone who's ever been a kid, which is everyone, and that's parenting and caring for kids' mental health. We all know how precious our children are, and navigating the complex landscape of their mental well-being can be incredibly challenging. I'm MommaFoxFire, and I'm so excited to introduce today's special guest, Tracy Hargen. Tracy is an advocate, a writer, and a passionate voice in the world of mental health. Her insights and experiences are inspiring, to say the least. If you've ever wondered about the best ways to support a child's mental health, whether that's your child or someone else's child, or maybe you've had questions about how to start that essential conversation with the child, you're in the right place today. This episode is a wellspring of wisdom and heartfelt sharing. As you listen to our conversation, you'll discover how it's okay to ask for help and why it's a sign of strength and not weakness. You'll also learn about resources, valuable tools, and even a delightful book recommendation that could help bring hope and understanding. Tracy and I are about to explore the world of parenting and nurturing kids' mental health, but it's not just a journey of understanding, it's also a journey of connection. Remember, you're not alone in this, and we're here to support you every step of the way. So whether you're a parent, a caregiver, or just someone who cares about the well-being of children, this episode is for you. This is a conversation that's packed with compassion, insight, and real, down-to-earth stories. Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine, get comfy, and let's dive into our journey of parenting and caring for kids' mental health. Happy Mental Health Monday. I hope everyone is having a great day today. Welcome back to the stream. I'm super excited for tonight's stream. We're going to be talking about parenting and kids and their mental health and kind of that caregiving that goes into parenting and their mental health. Really excited to bring you guys this conversation. I think it's going to be wonderful. Really excited to have Tracy Hargen joining me. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in just a minute. Bite Mark, welcome. Core, hello, welcome. If you type first in chat, you'll still get some points, even though Bite typed it before you. So if y'all have any questions for our guest tonight, we do have a question queue open, exclamation point, the letter Q, and then type your question. I'll put it into chat. I'll make sure that I address it as we go here. Just as we go through and you have any questions, just holler, put them in the chat, put them in the queue, and we'll get to them for sure. So a little bit about Tracy. Tracy has worked in sales and sales leadership positions in corporate America for over 30 years. She spent most of her career leading sales teams at American Express, and then in sales at ADP, Accenture, and Oracle, spending time in New York and New Jersey, and now in Georgia. She's been married to her husband, TJ, for over 30 years after knowing each other for just 6 months. They have 2 grown sons who live and work in Chicago, and her family's deeply personal journey through depression with her younger son made her a passionate mental health advocate. And you guys know my personal story with mental health advocacy and how it's based in something that happened to me. And so that's something that really resonates with me about Tracy. She has a mission to remove the shame and stigma that needlessly surround mental health. She understands firsthand that you never know what other people are going through, and it is her hope that by speaking publicly, she will raise awareness and speak for those who are unable to and who are suffering alone in silence. Through her work, her intention is to reach someone who needs to hear her message of hope so they will know they are not alone, and to change the way you think about mental health and spark a conversation with your family and friends to get people talking. By sharing her experience, she shows the importance of talking openly about mental health and the critical need to get people comfortable enough to ask for help and to utilize a mental health resource that are available to so many. And with that, I've got some links for you guys. If y'all are interested in finding Tracy anywhere, here are some links for you. And Tracy, thank you so much for agreeing to join me here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm so glad you're doing this. I think it's so important. And I love that you're trying to get people talking openly about mental health. So glad to be here.
Yeah, it's one of my passions as well. It's why I do this. It's why I'm here. So, and it was a very personal journey to get here too. And it's kind of one of those things that mental health advocacy, I wasn't on any sort of career path to be a therapist, to be a anything. I'm still not. I also still have a corporate job. Like I have my day job and I have my night job. So, and my night job is my passion. So, yeah, that's something that I think is a really neat thing that you and I have in common, which is pretty cool. So, what's something you love about working in the sales world? And is there anything that you hate about it?
Oh, wow. So what do I love? I do love, I was a waitress at one point when I was in college and in high school. And I think what I loved is that I really hustled and I did a good job. I got paid better. So, like as a waitress, your salary or whatever is horrible. But if you do really well and people like you and you take care of them, you get paid better. So I kind of liked that. I liked the competitiveness of it. I liked meeting people. And I always had to have a product or a service or a company that I represented that I felt was helping people. So I like that aspect of it too. What I don't like, I think after 30 years, I'm kind of tired of competing with other people and being ranked with other people. And so I love the company I'm working with now is a little more laid back in that regard. You still have to make your quota, but it isn't as hardcore pressure to, beat other people anymore. So I guess that aspect of it got a little old, but overall, I love it. I love being in sales.
Yeah, that ranking part of it. I know that I am an inside sales, so it's not quite the same. I don't have to meet, external quotas or anything, but I have clients inside the company that I have to kind of help and support their external goals and everything. And it's one of those, I hear them all the time talking about so-and-so this and so-and-so that. And it's like, it's such a competitive world.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It really is. Well, Cora said, thank you, Tracy, for being here. So you're getting a warm welcome, in chat. So that's always good. Yeah, I was also a waitress. When I was a waitress, it was like I remember the hourly rate going up from like $2.12 to $2.13, and that being a big deal.
Yeah.
$2.13.
I'm with you. I was at about the same time.
Yeah. I'm sure it's higher now, but I doubt it's much higher.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know what it is, but I doubt it's a whole lot higher.
Yeah.
That's a tough business for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, at least here in Texas, I doubt it's gone up very much, but I'm sure it's gone up some since then. Hopefully, I would hope so. So you also work with corporations outside your day job on mental health advocacy program, which I think is so cool. What have been some of the biggest challenges with that?
I would say, I didn't like you. I don't think I meant to get into this. Both of our kids are grown and flown. So I definitely have spare time, and I was looking for my passion. I just didn't know this was going to be it. And I never thought that I would use my corporate experience, with this. But what I found when I started sharing my experience, I shared it inside my company. And it was so funny because somebody said, and this is after we had been on CBS This Morning a couple of times, and I had a viral post. So it'd been very public, our story. And he said, I really admire your bravery for going public, but really the fact that you spoke to your colleagues. And what I realized is that work is the last place where we're willing to really be ourselves. So, work and home have just been, those lines are obliterated in the last year. But yet, some people were trying to run a daycare and a school and a business all from their home. And then they would come to a work meeting, a video conference, and they would just white knuckle their way through and act like everything was fine, even though they might be falling apart. So I just realized that we just don't share openly with our colleagues. And so when I did, I think it was surprising to people that I would talk openly about mental health, and people started reaching out to me saying, thank you so much for starting the conversation. And so the more I started talking to other companies, I realized that in some companies, it's definitely talked about. In other companies, it's almost a taboo subject. And then there's everything in between. And my goal is to get companies talking openly with their employees, get employees comfortable talking openly with the corporation, and also to really educate employees about what benefits their company offers. I know I learned about some that I didn't even know we had. And so a lot of companies are investing in mental health, and they've got to get the word out to employees, and they've got to get employees feeling comfortable to ask for help. I think, and I'm learning because I've done some global calls. In other countries, it's much more acceptable for me to say, I can't make that meeting. I've got an appointment with my therapist. Mm-hmm. Like, we wouldn't even think of saying that. But in other countries, that's definitely more acceptable. And I wanted to get us to that place.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a program called Positive Mental Health Champions, of which I am one. But even before that program went into place, I went through a very big experience with my grandfather. And it was one of those things that I couldn't hide it from work. Like, I was having to take time off. We were also in a very open office, like floor plan. So, yeah. They'd see me doing all the searches and stuff on his disappearance and everything. So there's no way I could have hidden that. But after that happened, I started seeing a therapist for depression. And it was one of those things that I talked about it. And the more I talked about it, the more other people talked to me about it. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so I talk about me going to therapy or me having like a bad depression day. And all of a sudden, the person who's sitting next to me, who has sat next to me for 5 years, is talking about her depression and what medication she's on or what she's tried that's helped her and what hasn't helped her. And it's just like, why didn't we talk about this stuff before? Like, it just gives you that connection point, because now it's not just somebody sitting next to you doing the same job. It's a human. I mean, they were already a human, but it's just another part of them that you get to see and connect with and help understand. And it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. You're right. We need to do it more.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you say that a lot of corporations are focusing more on mental health. I've seen that as well. But I think even before COVID, it was starting to happen. And COVID really kind of pushed it. Like, this is something that is impacting everyone on a global scale, and something that if you can address it with your employees, it's critically important. But it was critically important before, right? Like, yeah. That's not a new thing.
No, not at all.
So what do you enjoy doing when you are not working?
I love to swim. I love to cook with my family. I love to read, love outdoor stuff. So I really like to just be active and doing things. This has taken up a lot of my time, a lot more, recently, and I love that. So but yeah, one of my favorite things is to swim and to cook with my family. That's another big thing.
You mentioned reading. Do you have any books that you're reading right now that you would recommend? And I'm opening Goodreads right now to add them.
Let me think. I read a lot. I read novels. I have to have the book itself, and I love to listen to nonfiction. I don't know why that's the case, but so I'm reading a couple of things right now. And then I always have a magazine open where I'm drying my hair and stuff. So I've always got reading material going. I tell you, this isn't a book. I can definitely send you some book ideas. But one of my favorite things to read, like when I'm getting ready in the morning, is Mindful magazine.
Mm-hmm. So I
love it. Great ideas for stress relief. A lot of acknowledgement of mental health issues. So I love that. It's not light reading. It's not, at night I'm reading because I want to just escape into another world and just, tune out everything and so I can sleep. But yeah, those are the things I have right now. But I will send you, that. If you want some book ideas, I'll definitely send you.
Oh, listen, my want to read list on Goodreads is longer than longer than I could probably ever read. And I'm always adding stuff to it. So if you have any that you read that are great lately, I'm always open for a good book recommendation. Absolutely. I think Mindful magazine was the one that Kevin from Laugh for a Purpose was featured in just recently, which is awesome.
That was so weird. When I saw that on his website, I had just gotten that issue. And I was like,
oh, that's awesome.
It's so weird. And I opened, I'm like, there it is. And I took a picture of it for him because he hadn't seen the actual magazine. Yeah. It's not really easy to find. I think I found it in Whole Foods and then got a subscription. But yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. He's wonderful. So we have a question from the chat, and Bitemark asks, what is your favorite poem?
My favorite poem. Okay, this is easy. This is an easy one. It is called, and I'm pulling it up. It's called Instructions for a Bad Day, and it's by Shane Koyczan. And it's spelled Koyczan, Shane Koyczan. You can find it on YouTube. He does a reading. He does a lot of poetry readings that are great, but Instructions for a Bad Day really touched my heart because, as we start talking, you'll hear that my journey started with my son, William, when he was a junior in high school. And as we were going through this journey together, we had to find new ways to talk to each other and really be able to communicate, because I couldn't just say, are you okay today? How's today? Are you okay? I mean, that's kind of annoying. So we had to find ways to really talk to each other. And he came to me one day and said, you got to hear this. And we sat and watched it together. And when I'm having a bad day, I listen to it. It's just so beautiful. And he just talks about, if you feel like you're alone, you're not. You always have a friend. If you're going through a crisis, you've got to speak up. And if you don't think anyone's listening, speak louder. It's just really beautiful. And he talks about the fact that we're not meant to carry these burdens our entire life. And we have to try to find ways to uncurl our fist and let go. So it's probably about 3 to 5 minutes long. It's not a short thing, but he does there's a couple of really beautiful readings that he does of it online.
That's awesome. Well, I just put his website in the chat. So if anybody wants to go check it out, I'm sure you can find the links from there. You can put it into YouTube. Yeah. This question, Bite started asking this question, I don't know, probably about a year ago. To guests, and it has, I tell you, some of the answers we've gotten have just been really different and really unique and really wonderful, and I love it. It's a great question.
Good.
Do you have a serial killer or a true crime story that fascinates you?
Okay, so I saw this and I thought, I really don't, but I do watch a fair amount of Dateline and 48 Hours. So I do watch a lot of the true crime. And my son makes fun of me if he's here, because he's like, oh, she definitely did it. He has no idea. Just walks in the room. He's like, she definitely did it. And, he's whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. So they kind of make fun of me. But yeah, I do. I do like to watch those shows. I think it's just, sometimes like during COVID, I actually stopped watching them because everything was so heavy. I was like, I can't take anything more, like another murder. But it is kind of interesting, just, what people's thought process is and what sticks with people and our justice system. So it is interesting, but
Yeah. Those shows. I used to watch Criminal Minds a whole bunch, which isn't the same as Dateline. And please don't mistake me. I'm not saying that it is, but I used to watch that show a whole bunch. And during COVID, I kind of stopped watching it because I was just like, I didn't stop listening to the murder podcast that I listened to, but I did dial back that content choice a little bit because I was just like, there's too much around me already. Yeah. Like I barely listen to the news anymore because it got, especially lately, it was really bad for a little while. Not so bad now, but so I get that completely.
Yeah, we got to have boundaries and self-care and know when to dial things back, for sure.
Well, I commend you for recognizing that was something that you had control over, that you could kind of dial back and say, like, I'm not going to consume this right now. I'm going to focus on something else.
Yep.
So to get into the main topic a little bit tonight, I know your story a little bit, but at 17, your son came to you and said, I need to talk to you, and then proceeded to tell you that he was severely depressed and needed help. And I understand that this was something that was, for you, a little bit out of the blue. So how did you react, and how do you wish you had reacted?
Yeah. So he was a junior in high school, and he came into my room one night, I'll never forget. And he said, Mom, can we talk? And if you're a parent, or if someone's ever said those words to you, that's kind of your chance to kind of brace yourself, because something serious is about to be said. So I said, and thankfully I turned off the TV and I said, sit down, what's going on? And I was thinking, okay, he's studying for finals and he's stressed, or he's thinking about college or what he's going to do this summer. So, all these things are going through my head. And so when he said, I'm depressed, and I'm seriously depressed, and I have been for a long time, it blew me away, because in that moment, I'm glad the way I reacted. It's not my normal reaction. So obviously his setup really did tell me to brace myself, because what I was thinking was, you're not depressed. I would know if you were depressed, and I hear you laughing and you're getting up every day and you seem fine. So you're probably just stressed and, but you're fine. And I'm thinking all these things. And thankfully, something said to me, this is not about you. This is about him. He would not be saying this if it wasn't true. And he looks very serious. So just listen. So I did. And he was very articulate about what he'd been going through. He had confided in a teacher that day who basically said, you've got to tell your parents. And if you don't tell them, I'm going to tell them. And so he did. He told me my husband was out that evening. He was coaching a lacrosse game. So when he came home, I hadn't had a chance to kind of warn him. So he walked into this conversation and he's like, what's up? And they're like, well, here's what's going on. But it was really good because we sat as a family and we put together a plan and we talked about what we were going to do. And basically our message was, thank you for trusting us. Thank you for telling us. And you're not carrying this burden alone anymore. And I think he says now it was the right thing, but I knew then it probably was, because he just looked like this burden had been taken off of his shoulders. Nothing had changed. We hadn't done anything yet, but he didn't have to carry it alone. And when we started saying, like, how long has this been going on? At first he said, oh, just a while, maybe a year. It wasn't until we were really into it and talking, and that he said it'd been going on since he was 9 years old.
Wow.
I mean, he'd been carrying that for so long, and that just breaks my heart. And I thanked the teacher, and, they will always hold a special place in our heart, because thankfully that's who he told, and not somebody where it might have not been such a positive, guidance.
Yeah. I mean, thank goodness for teachers who listen and teachers who really care about kids. I mean, that's one of those things that you can have good teacher, you can have a bad teacher. But if your kid takes something important to them, they need to know how to react and how to get your kid to the right place. I think that's teachers are underpaid, first of all, but
and underappreciated.
All the things. I mean, for everything that they have to do, everything they have to be on top of, everything they have to know how to handle. That's one of the most important things, is just making sure that the kid is getting the right support that they need. So
and I mean that goes for all of our adult mentors, coaches, whatever, at their schools. It's so important, because sometimes that is who they go to or trust. And so they've really got a lot to handle.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice on connecting with your kids and making sure you know how they're feeling versus how they're presenting, kind of reflecting back on that experience from 9 to 17, anything that you kind of noticed there?
Yeah. So, even looking back, there weren't signs that we missed or things that, we should have picked up on. I mean, he said, I didn't know at first, was it intentional or not that he kept it hidden? Well, what we found out later was that, in teens and kids, and even really adults too, it doesn't always present as lethargic, sad, can't get out of bed. For him, it was numbness. He felt nothing. He felt like there was a darkness around him. And he didn't have, especially at 9, the language or the concepts to be able to relay to us what he was feeling. And he just looked around and everybody else seemed fine. So what was wrong with him? And he needed to figure out what was wrong with him. And so, I would just say, we had talked about depression. We'd actually had someone we knew, their son had died by suicide, and we had talked about it. We had depression in our family, so we had talked about it. But we had always talked about, being really sad and being real. I didn't know that some of the symptoms could be numbness and just feeling a darkness. So definitely we were educated in that. But that's hard to look for. How do you look for that when the person is, his room was right across the hall and I'd hear him laughing. So to me, he looked like happiness and not depression. But to answer your question, a couple of things come to mind. One is, as I started, trying to find new ways to communicate with him, I would find memes online and I'd cut them out and I'd, put them on his desk. And one of them said, saying I'm tired when what I really mean is I'm sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I put that down and I was like, is that what it's like? And he said, yeah. And I thought back to all the times he said he was tired. And I've talked to other people who said, yeah, sometimes I just say I'm tired because I don't want to go into it. And so that kind of became our code word. And it was interesting. One day he was like, I'm going to bed. I'm just tired. And I guess I looked at him. He goes, no, I'm really just tired.
I'm physically tired.
It's legit. I'm not trying to send you a message.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I would just say, start a conversation. Even if you think your kids are okay, your spouse is okay, have a conversation. And I would tell people, print out my post or, show the video when we were on CBS this morning and say, have you ever felt this way? And, and just talk about it and keep it going. And the other thing, I got to recommend this book that I found. These authors reached out to me. It's called Ezra's Invisible Backpack. And it doesn't say depression. It doesn't say mental health, but it talks about this kid. And he's talking about the invisible backpack that he carries. And some days, the teachers started the concept. And she said, some days I have 4 invisible bricks that really weigh down my backpack. And other days I don't. And today I have 3 bricks because my car broke down or whatever. And it was so interesting because I showed this to Will, my son, and he said, I think if I'd had something like that, I could have said to you when I was 9 or 10, I have a lot of bricks in my backpack. And then we could have talked about that. He didn't think of the word depression or I'm struggling with my mental health at 9, but certainly that this is a concept that they can understand. And I gave this to my niece who has little kids, and her 7-year-old said to her, so do you mean that my friends might be sad even though they look happy and I wouldn't know it? And I was like, yes, exactly. That's it. So I love that book. They started it because one of the author's nephews died by suicide, and she's trying to get people talking in schools. So it's for parents and counselors and therapists. And I just think it's fantastic. So.
Yeah, that's one of those things that it's hard to come up with language to talk to little kids, especially. I have an 8-year-old who just turned 8 this week. And so we have my 14-year-old is in therapy for anxiety and for some intrusive thoughts and stuff. And so whenever we go to therapy, last time we went to therapy was last Friday, and he kind of goes, Mom, do I have a therapist? I was like, no, you don't have a therapist. You have a neurologist. You have your regular doctor because he has Tourette's. And so he has different doctors that he sees. And I said, do you have something that you want to talk to a therapist about? Like, what is there something that you want to? And he's like, no. I said, okay, well, would you tell me? Like, I'll keep checking with you, but would you tell me if you had something you wanted to talk to someone about? And I said, you have the school counselor, like you have all these options and everything. And it's one of those things that I'm glad he asked me that question because it opened up a conversation, but I don't know if my 14-year-old wasn't already in therapy. I don't know that conversation would have happened. And so it's hard to sometimes find the context for kids to understand what you're talking about. And especially if they don't have an older sibling who's going through something like that. And it's hard to sometimes just find the language to communicate to them on a level they're going to understand. So that book to me is really good.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that. I was given a talk one time and somebody in the audience gave this great suggestion. And if I had little kids, I would definitely do this. She said she's been taking her kids to a therapist once a year for a checkup. And she's like, I take them to the pediatrician. Why don't I take them to a therapist? And she said, then if they have an issue, they've got someone to talk to. And I thought, oh, that would never occur to me. When do you see a therapist? When it's a critical issue and you need to do something about it. But I just loved that. And I thought, oh, if I had little kids, I think I would do that. So
I love that too. I think I actually might start doing that because it's one of those things. I mean, we go see the neurologist once a year. It's not, it's just to confirm he doesn't need to be on medication or anything like that. And the doctor just once a year. I mean, that's for his checkup, for his flu shot, those kinds of things. I don't think I would have put that into the context of, well, let's go add a therapist to the rotation, but it's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. And then, they can tell you from there, if you've got a therapist who you like, they can tell you from there, hey, I think we need to maybe add another session. I want to get more out of this to kind of, or just, no, everything's good.
Yeah, I know. I loved it. I was like, I don't know why I didn't think of that, but thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you mentioned suicide already a little bit, and I know that suicide rates in kids, and this blows my mind, but ages 10 to 24, like 10 years old, that absolutely boggles my mind. But suicide rates in kids 10 to 24 has been increasing year over year since 2007, well before the pandemic. So that's, I hate to think about it this way, but more than 10 years ago, it was already increasing. And the pandemic just made things a little bit worse. So how different is that conversation when you're talking to your kids versus a teen versus now you have grown adult kids? So is it different from when they were teens to now when they're adults? And when you talked to them when they were kids, how different were those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I thought we'd always been a really open family. We had talked about depression. We had talked about, as I said, a family friend whose son died by suicide. So, we had used those terms and we had talked about it really openly. But, I think kids don't really think about it pertaining to them unless they're in a crisis.
Yeah.
And so, Will says he never felt suicidal. But it was interesting because in the CBS interview, Mark Strausman asked him, he said, you said you never felt suicidal, but what was that moment like when you told your mom? And he said, yeah, that's a moment where it could have gotten far better or far worse.
Yeah.
And I just think, like when they tell you and they tell you it's serious and they tell you that they need help, you really have to take it seriously. And I was certainly concerned about that. It certainly crossed my mind. And I couldn't say, do you feel suicidal now? I just we had to keep trying to talk to each other and trust each other that we were being open. But I think the language changes. And I think, when you go through something like this, you start being really open and you start being really straightforward with each other and talking about how you feel. And it's interesting because what Will would say is that depression for him in many ways is a gift now. It certainly didn't feel like a gift. I'm not trying to be trite. It was scary and lonely and dark. But he says now he can catch himself when he's spiraling and he knows what to do to pull himself out. And he knows the things, for coping mechanisms. So, I do think it's really important that even if you think your kids are okay, that these are conversations we're having, because what we've found is that talking openly about it does not make it manifest in your child. It gives them words to their feelings, which is really the first step to getting help. So that's what I would say.
And it kind of gives them that release valve to talk about it. If it is something that's bothering them, you're not going to, that's something that I think is a huge misconception, is that if you talk to someone about any particular mental health disorder or any mental illness, you're not going to cause it to manifest. You're not going to cause it to happen, but you can give them that release valve to just have that moment of less pressure, because they have someone who's going to listen to them. They have someone who's going to talk to them, who they can talk to about it and be honest about it. And that's such a big thing. They also teach you that whenever you're doing a mental health first aid class, that's part of that suicide prevention, is when you ask someone, have you thought of killing yourself? It's one of those things that you're not going to give them the thought of, I'm going to kill myself. You're going to give them the opportunity to talk about it and for you to get more details and go through all the steps of, do you have a plan? What is your plan? Do you have access to the things? You can go through the rest of those steps to help them through that crisis moment, but you have to start with a conversation. And I think that conversation definitely varies by age in how you start that conversation, but having that conversation is really important, because you just give them that opportunity to share. And if you don't give them the opportunity to share, I've got a teenager. They won't.
I'm fine. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Right. How's your day? Fine.
Yep. Or I'm tired. So yeah.
Right. Yes. Yep. So you mentioned this a little bit already, but there is a huge misconception around depression signs and symptoms. I mean, it's not always, even in adults, but especially in kids, it's not always can't get out of bed, living in my own filth kind of thing that a lot of people think of whenever they hear depression. I mean, I have major depressive disorder, and I get up every day. I'm generally my hair is clean, everything, it looks fine on the outside. So do you feel like there are some signs and symptoms for kids that get overlooked in a huge way beyond that just numbness piece that's really hard to identify?
Yeah, I think another way that it can manifest is like irritation and annoyance that maybe you hadn't seen before. The problem is a lot of teens are like that anyway. You easily annoy them. So is that depression, or is that just, them being teens and you're their parent? So I think that Will got up early every morning. He was going to school. Everything seemed fine. So I think that there are a lot of missed signals. There's a great commercial, and it shows like a guy going up the escalator, and it says across his chest, "I just found out my mother's dying of cancer." And he looks, fine. He's going up the escalator, going to work. And each person that he passes has something they're dealing with, but they look to him like they're fine. And, I think there's the show on Apple, The Me You Can't See. It's a great mental health documentary about mental health around the world. And I think it's just, I know this comes later about the magic wand. If you could change anything, it would be that like you could see someone's mental health struggle, or that people would know that a lot of times you just can't see it. And so unless you ask the questions and you're having those hard conversations, you may never know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are plenty of times where someone's going through something you don't know what they've just experienced. There are also times where it's not based on an experience that you had. It truly is just a misfiring in your brain. And so it's hard. It's hard to kind of identify that if you're not in that person's head, for sure. I mean,
somebody said to me the other day, mental health is like, what's the exact quote? It's something like, the roof is leaking, but you wouldn't know it unless you lived in the house. And I was like, oh God, that's so good. Because unless you're in that person's mind, you have no way to know what they're thinking. So, I think we have to really kind of change what we think mental health looks like and what we think someone struggling with mental health looks like, because they look like you and me, not like something scary or something dark. It's like all of us.
Yep. I personally know people who can have a panic attack on camera in a meeting and no one can tell. But they get off of that call and maybe something was just slightly off, and I touch base with them after. They're like, "Yeah, no, I'm now curled up on my floor." and it's just one of those things you don't know. You don't know how a particular illness is going to manifest in them. Just like it's like the flu. Yeah. You don't know how bad the flu is going to be. You might get it. Maybe you had your flu shot and you still got the flu and it's not so bad. Or maybe you're curled up on the couch and really just all of your bones hurt. Yeah. And it could be really bad and you could have to go to the hospital. It's a huge spectrum, no matter which mental illness you're talking about. It's a huge spectrum of what it looks like on the outside, what it feels like on the inside. And just, it's so hard if you're not having those open conversations, especially with your kids, but also with your coworkers. I mean, that's a big deal. You got to have those conversations with your coworkers too. We spend, at least I, most people who have like a 9 to 5, although it's not 9 to 5 now, but it's like 7 to 6. But we spend more. A day job. We spend more of our time with coworkers sometimes than we get to with our own family, because those hours when you're home with your family, most of them are sleeping. Yeah, and so if you've got a work family who you spend more of your time with, you gotta open up and let them open up.
Exactly.
That's definitely a hard thing to get companies to realize, I think.
Yeah, I do too. It really is. It's just not been acceptable, and we're trying to change that for sure.
Yeah. So how do you go about trying to change that with a company?
So one of the things on my website that I'm going to add in the coming weeks is a quiz, and it's are you doing enough to help your employees with their mental health? And I just want companies to be thinking about it. Do you offer flexible work schedules? Do you offer remote days? Do you offer mental health days? Do you have a mental health strategy? Do you have a mental health campaign? And what I'm trying to get them to think of is, I know what best in class companies do. I'm working with some of them. I've worked for some of them. And are you doing these things? And inevitably, most companies can tick off 1 or 2,
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4, but it's very rare that they can tick off all of them. It's very rare the company that has peer sharing and peers that are educated on how to deal. You were talking about dealing with a mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. So there's some companies that people have raised their hand and say, yes, I'll be one of those people. And so they've educated them and they talk openly about mental health. So they don't just have mental health insurance coverage, but they are making it an active part of the company. And oh my gosh, when a CEO or a leader shares, I'm struggling with this, or I have a family member struggling with this, it just blows everything up. It is the best thing. Even if somebody says, this has been a rough year for everybody, and I don't know what you're going through, but I want you to know I care. Oh my gosh. So I'm telling companies it's one thing to say you care. It's quite another to show them that you care.
Yeah.
So you got to do that, because otherwise they'll go someplace else. People want that. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm trying to open conversations, and I'm really trying to get companies to look within to say, am I doing enough? Because it is my responsibility to try and help my employees. I can't just ignore it.
Yeah. I would encourage anybody who's listening, anybody who hears this, to find out what your company does for mental health, because even my team, and like I said, I am a positive mental health champion. I talk about my own mental health. We talk about, as a team, our mental health collectively, individuals, what they're facing. We check in with each other on a one-on-one level. But I had someone just recently who was going through a true crisis in their personal life. And I was like, have you used the EAP? Have you called the EAP hotline? And they were like, the what?
Yeah, exactly.
So even in a company, because it's not just me. I mean, it's a big company. Right. We have a big program out. Literally, our CEO talks about mental health on his global calls. And so it's one of those things that we are focused on supporting mental health, but still the resources aren't necessarily something that everyone knows about. And so I would encourage you as an employee to go find out what the options are. Find out what's covered.
Yeah. And a lot of times there's Slack channels, there's groups, there's probably people in your company that don't know your group even exists.
Yeah.
It's just, and I think sometimes you just don't think about those benefits if you don't need them, but gosh, when you need them, then you're like scrambling to find out, what do we offer? So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Ask around, look and see what's available.
Yeah. So kind of getting, we got a little bit, I sidetracked us, which is my favorite thing to do. But as a family, what daily routines really helped y'all get through that after your son came to you? And did you have anything in place for safety or creating a more open dialogue?
Yeah, so a few things. We did have to start really talking more openly. There was no more, carrying these things alone. The memes helped. He'd find things and he might give them to me. We found things that we felt were inspiring and we'd share them, like, if he found a song or if I found a song or just a poem or an expression. And we put little things up around the house, positive messages, which sounds a little trite and superficial, but really when you're struggling, sometimes just seeing that message is the reminder that you need to kind of refocus and be positive. We also did acupuncture. I love that. That was really good for both of us. Meditation. There's great meditation apps out there. I need guided meditation because my mind is going too much. I can't just sit and be still, but somebody guiding me and talking the whole time is definitely kind of more my speed. So there's great meditation. And we would do that. We didn't really do it as a family. It was more of an individual thing, but that was really helpful. And writing. So he's a writer too. And I've just found writing down how I was feeling, what I was going through that nobody was ever going to see, just me, kind of helped get it out of my head. And I would encourage people that if you aren't a writer or you don't feel like you're a writer, or you just can't imagine sitting and writing this stuff down, even if at night you just write down 3 things that you're grateful for, or 3 good things that happened that day, just getting in the mindset of writing down what's going on in your head definitely helps take some of those constant thoughts of, is everything okay? Are we okay? Is he okay? out of your head and kind of changes your perspective. So those are some of the things that really worked for us.
Yeah. And we, in this community, I always end every stream with 3 things I'm grateful for, but that came from a therapy session that I had where she recommended the same thing. And she was just like, just list them out. And if it's part of the content, that's great, but also do whenever it's not part of the content. And it's one of those things that it's easy to forget to do, but when you do it, it's wonderful. Like it really, if you think about, okay, what am I grateful for today? And so we even have a spot in the Discord. It's an attitude of gratitude channel, and it pings. You can pick to be pinged, and it pings twice a week to just say, hey, what's something you're thankful for this week? And it's just taking that moment to be like, what am I thankful for this week? And it could be the smallest thing. Like I'm thankful for gum today. Like, whatever it is.
I got pinged today. I mean, it can be the smallest. Yeah.
It's really great. So I'll ask you, do you have do you listen to any meditation podcasts?
I don't. I listen to, I use Insight Timer and I use Calm. Insight Timer, you can get the free version. You can get everything you need from the free version. I think the paid for version is like $10 a year, but it just, every subject you can imagine, every length of time. I've used it at night to go to sleep. I've used it in the morning just to kind of set my day on the right track. So those are, I don't have a podcast to recommend, but definitely some good apps that aren't expensive that definitely do the trick.
Yeah. So I linked Insight Timer and Calm and chat if anyone's interested in checking those out. I am going to link one more thing. I'm going to link the Meditation Minis podcast, because this is something that we do every day on the way to school. I turn it on and my 8-year-old will complain. But then if I ask him, okay, well, Wednesday was his birthday. I said, all right, it's your birthday. You get to pick whether we listen to the Meditation Minis podcast or not. And he said, I guess we can listen to it. I'm like, okay.
You secretly like it.
Yes. So they're like 10 minutes long, which I love. And also they're very guided. And it's, Shell Hamilton is a hypnotist. And so, she takes you through just a 10-minute, and there are ones for being calm. There are ones for depression. There's ones for clearing your day, preparing your day, whatever you're looking for. And they're 10 to 15 minutes long. And we do one with all 3 of us in the car, my 8-year-old, my 14-year-old and I, on the way to my 8-year-old school, and then my 14-year-old and I do one on the way to their school as well. So it's one of those things that even if it's really short, it really does help me prepare for my day. So in addition to those apps, if y'all are interested, there's that link to that.
That's great.
And I'm the same. I can't turn my brain off. Like if it's just music and I'm supposed to meditate, it's not going to happen.
I'm making a list of all the things I should be doing.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Or just completely dive down a rabbit hole, whatever it is. Like my brain is just gone, and then 30 minutes have passed and I've done nothing. Wait a minute.
And it's funny because if you do it regularly, even if you just tried it for 2 weeks, when you don't do it, you notice. Like I notice, like at 11 o'clock, the day has just gotten away from me. I've just been going, here, there, and everywhere. I'm like, okay, I just got to stop and ground myself. And it seems so simple, but it definitely works.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a mom, and especially as a working mom with a day job and also passion projects, which is similar to me, what do you do for your own mental health?
It's funny. I heard a friend's mom who's retired talking about how she loves to go to the salon and get a massage. And I thought, God, when I retire, I hope I can do all those things. And then I'm like, why am I waiting till I retire? Yes, they cost money. Yes, I need to, be conscious of that. But these are things that make me feel better, like therapeutic massage or acupuncture. So why am I waiting until I retire? I need to find a way to work it into my day. So I go to acupuncture every other week. It looks like a doctor's appointment on my calendar. I schedule around it, and, just like I would any other appointment. And I look forward to it. So I think, that self-care and the whole putting the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can help everybody else. Otherwise, how can you be of any help?
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in self-care. And I heard somebody said, when you say someone is selfless, that's really not a compliment. compliment. It means they really have lost themselves because all they're doing is for everybody else. So I don't think self-care is selfish. I think it is taking care of yourself so that you can then take care of other people if that's what you need to do. So I definitely have little things that make me, more calm, feel better. And I have no problem indulging in them because it doesn't feel like indulgence. It feels like a necessity.
Yeah. And it's especially as a mom, if you don't self-care, like you either take care of yourself or shit's going to explode in a little bit. Like that's what's going to happen. You take care of yourself or there's going to be some sort of issue later. And so like my kids know they're not painted right now and they're actually really short because I haven't painted them in a while. So I probably shouldn't be the best example right now, but I usually paint my nails on Sundays and that's my self-care time. It takes several hours to do because I usually do all kinds of art on them. And so it's one of those things that I'll sit here and I'll paint my nails and it's like, oh, mommy can't help you right now. No. Nope. Mommy can't help you right now. My nails are wet. I can't open anything. I can't do anything. But then I also started watering the garden and I water the garden anyway, but I started watering the garden when I bring the kids home from school, just stay outside for a minute, kick off my shoes, put my feet in the grass and water the garden. And it's one of those things that my 8-year-old has, sometimes he likes to come outside and just help me and stuff. And, he'll start talking to me. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. I want to talk to you. But right now I'm having a little bit of a mindfulness practice while I water this garden. Why don't you go over here and do this thing and you think about your day too, and then we'll talk after. Yeah. And it's like, if you can do that and kind of model that also, exactly. It's even better. So there's plenty of like self-care practice where you're like, nope, mommy can't help. Sorry. Figure it out or wait. But then also you can take a moment and be like, this is what I'm doing to help myself. You go help yourself and then we'll connect after.
The modeling thing is really important. You're right.
Yeah, it is. It's really important. That actually came from one of these talks as well, because I was talking to a guest about, some of the things that I do and some of the things that they do. And it was just one of those things that it came out of it. I was like, well, you can use that to kind of connect as well. So I started doing that. It's been great. I don't connect with this one though. Do you have any tips for those who are speaking about mental health stigma and who might just be getting started in that?
Yeah, I think people can tell when you're authentic, when you're passionate about something, when it really means something to you, and they can tell when you're holding back. So whenever I'm talking, I tell our story and I try to be really open and honest. I do try for it to be hopeful and I try and give people hope if they're struggling with it. I want them to know they're not alone, but I don't sugarcoat it. I talk about some of the hard times, hard things that we went through. And I think if you're willing to be open and vulnerable, like we were talking about, people really respond to that. So I would just say, share as much as you're comfortable with. Certainly don't share something you're not comfortable with or you'll regret talking about. And certainly if you're talking about someone else, like I'm talking about my son, I have his permission and his support. Yes. Yep. In fact, we did a talk this last week with a company, and for the first time he joined me. And it was so amazing. And it was really funny because I said, okay, so you need to tell me afterward, like, should I take anything out? Should I not talk about part of it? And he was like, no, it was all great. But he was there for the Q&A. And it was so great because people really wanted to ask him questions directly. Mm-hmm. I'm sure some of these people had kids, had teens, had young adults, and they wanted to know, did your parents do anything that you felt was helpful? Did they do anything that you felt, made it worse? And he was it was so great that he was able to join me. So I would just say, if you're going to talk about somebody else, just make sure that they're okay with what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important. I love that he got to join you because I know when you were on Laugh for a Purpose, you said that was one of your goals, right? Yes. Was to have him join you for a talk. So I love that you got to have that moment with him. That's really special. Do you think y'all are going to continue that together?
Yeah. So that was the first time. I didn't know if he would want to do it. I didn't know if the company would want to do it. So, I asked him first and he said, because I told him, you don't have to do any of the talk. I'll introduce you and you can say a few words. And then I think you'd be great if you're there for the Q&A. And then I asked the company and they were like, yeah, sure. And it was so powerful. So yeah, he said he would definitely do it again. And I'm just thrilled.
That's great. That's fantastic.
when you think about where we came from, where he carried this alone for so long, he couldn't tell us, he couldn't tell anyone. And now he's telling complete strangers. I mean, it's awesome.
Well, and y'all are working together to help other people. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And trust me, whenever I start to kind of scale back, like when we were about to start the CBS This Morning interview, I looked at Will and I said, I don't think we should do it. And he goes, what? And I said, I just got like protective mom mode. Like, what if this goes bad? What if this ruins his progress? What am I thinking, telling, the world? And I said, I just think it's a bad idea. I think we should. And he goes, Mom, it's okay. It's just a conversation. And we're going to help people who can't speak for themselves yet. And we're going to help families know that their kids might be struggling and we have to do this. And I was like, oh my God, okay, we're ready. Let's go.
Yep.
So anytime I kind of think about it, he's always in the back of my mind saying, we're just having a conversation. We're just helping people. We got to do this for those people who were like him and they're 9 or 10 and they can't say anything. So, yeah.
That's great. I love that. So does what you and your family have lived through help you relate to others? Have there been any times where your experiences have helped you directly connect with someone else? I know that y'all do these talks all the time, but has there been any other direct connection?
Yeah. It's interesting because when we did, when I wrote the post about my son and I used his photo and went viral, I again kind of thought like, oh my God, what have I opened up? How are people going to respond? And it was really interesting because we were on this CBS This Morning Stop the Stigma town hall. They invited us to come to New York and Will asked a question on air. And he came home from that back to college. He was in college at the time and he ran into a friend. And the friend said, where have you been? And he told them, and he was like, God, you talk so openly about that and what you're going through. And he goes, well, I didn't before, this has been like a journey. And the guy was from Turkey, his friend. And he said, it is taboo to talk about in our culture, in our society, and certainly in my family. And I have struggled and I've told no one. And it was so great for Will because it was a full circle moment because he said, I didn't try and help him. I didn't try and make it okay, but I encouraged him to talk to a therapist at school and I followed up with him to make sure. And I just listened to him and I was like, oh, so there's things that have come about. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well, things that you never expected and people that you never expected it to come from. At the flip side, my whole family was not always supportive. I mean, my mom was like, you're going to tell people about this? Why would you do that? Why would you tell? And I just thought, and I finally said to her, we're going to be talking about this. If you're not comfortable with it, like you need to get on board or you're not going to be part of it. But we need people that are going to support what we're trying to do here. And maybe you've run into that with family and friends that are like, why are you talking about that? But, we know why we're talking about it and we know we're helping people. So, I think it has been really interesting that the comments and people will, as when you're vulnerable, they will open up and tell you things they may not have told anyone else. And sometimes that's a lot. And sometimes you have to, have your own boundaries too, because if you take on what everybody's feeling, it's hard for you to go on. So you have to really find the difference between compassion and empathy and taking on everyone else's emotions and still being compassionate and helping. It's really been amazing. I have to say, it's been a very positive experience for both of us.
That's really great. I mean, it does still feel a little bit even, and this was years ago that I started doing this and it was years ago since I started doing these interviews and everything, but it was years ago that I started getting involved in mental health stuff at work. And it's like, there is still that risk. It felt, especially at the time, like a much bigger risk than it feels like now, because there is such a stigma around it. And if I'm talking about being depressed, is that going to reflect poorly on my annual review? The answer so far has been no, but that is definitely something that has been in the back of my mind in the past, is how much is my boss going to care that I'm talking openly about something that does sometimes impact my performance at work. And I've been really fortunate that it just hasn't impacted my relationship with my boss at all. She's great. She knows that I do a podcast. I will be honest, I have not ever given her a link.
There
I'm
are some boundaries.
Yes. I'm like, we get a little after dark on this one sometimes. So, and I haven't gone that far, but it's one of those things that, she knows that I'm passionate about mental health. She knows that I'm involved in the Positive Mental Health Champion through work that's kind of work sanctioned. And I've talked openly on team calls with our larger team to say, here's some of the things that I've struggled with. And if anybody's struggling with something similar, holler, I'm here. And it does still feel a little bit like, whoa, you're really going to talk about that? But less and less, which I'm grateful for. So if you weren't doing what you do now, day job, night job, mom job, all of them, or if you'd chosen a different path in life, what would you be doing instead?
I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was younger because I just loved animals.
Me too.
I've learned now that they don't just play with animals and get to see a lot of animals. They see horrible things too. But I did think that's what I wanted to do. When I think back, like when I was a kid, what did I think I'd be? I certainly didn't think I'd be in sales. And I certainly didn't think anything, this mental health thing has just come about in the last 5 years. And it still surprises me that my contacts at work have helped me with my mental health advocacy. And it's interesting because I've reached out to people that I've known through work to talk to their company. And it was interesting to me how open they were with me. Like, this means something to me. This is happening in my family right now, and I really want you to come and talk. So it surprised me just how much my career path has helped in my mental health advocacy, because I never, even when I started down this mental health path, didn't see how those things would cross. So it's been really an interesting ride.
Yeah. That's I wanted to be a vet when I was a kid. I even volunteered at a vet's office for a summer. And that was a great experience because then I realized I didn't want to be a vet. So,
exactly.
So there was that. But that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I feel like, especially in mental health advocacy, we are in such a unique position to help people in a different way than mental health professionals. And so I've been asked, well, would you ever want to go back in your life and have been a therapist? And I'm like, I don't think so, because then you can't talk about what you've been through and how that has impacted you and what you did to come over. You can't share your personal story the way you can when you are a mental health advocate. And, I've heard people say, well, you're just a mental health advocate. And I'm like, no, I am a mental health advocate. Like, they're two separate. There's places for both. There's two separate things.
And I'm really clear when I give my talks too, that I'm not a mental health professional. Like, when I talk about the things that helped us and I talk about medication and I talk about therapy, I'm like, look, I'm not telling you need to do these things or as a professional. I'm just telling you as a mom who went through this with her family. And I just know, I wish I'd known some of these things when I was going through it. In fact, my son and I are writing a book together because we're both big readers and writers, and we couldn't find a book that suited us when we were going through it. And I thought, I want to write the book for families that I wish we had had. So I think, I do think it's important that mental health advocacy is a different angle on this. And sometimes you can be much more passionate about it because you don't have to have that sterile professionalism. You can be like, there's times when I talk about it, even with corporations. And when it comes to showing Will's picture, during freshman orientation, and they had this exercise called Dear World, and what he wrote on his arm. And every time I see that, I start to tear up. And I'm like, that's okay. That's me being human. I couldn't do that as a therapist, but so I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I have a not a pro command for my stream because it says, Mama is not a professional mental health worker. I bring up topics I care about and discuss with an open mind and compassionate heart, but I cannot provide therapy in any way, shape, or form. If you need more than just to talk to someone, I encourage you to find a pro. I'll even help you find resources in your area if you don't know where to start. And it's one of those things that I added it because I wanted to be really clear, like, that's not me. I didn't go to any kind of school I'm just here sharing my experience,
Yep.
what I went through and how I got the help that I needed and how I'm getting other people the help that they need. So I think what you're doing is wonderful and it's fantastic. So
Ditto.
well, it is time. You mentioned this earlier, but it is time for the magic moment. And what happens with this is I get to wave my magic wand, which I do actually have a magic wand here. So when I wave this, you get to pick one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health and eliminate it. So what would you like for it to be? And I'll just give this a little wave.
I would like for it to be that you can see mental health, that you would know if someone around you was struggling. And I wish that there was some physical manifestation so that we would know. That I just wish that was something that was so much more clear, because if someone had a broken leg, I'd see the cast. I might even ask them, how are you doing? Can I, help you? But you don't see that mental struggle with somebody. And so I would just, I think people have to be very careful and be very kind, because you just don't know what other people are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a question from the chat here. Angel asks, how do you think the internet has affected mental health services available to teens? That's a great question.
Yeah, and not to plug, I don't have anything to do with Mindful Magazine. So I'm not just giving them I'm not getting paid to say this, but in their issue, their latest issue, they talk about different services. I think it was Mindful. Oh, now I'm thinking, was it Oprah Magazine? Anyway, they were talking about different therapies that have come up in the last few years that didn't exist before. And I didn't know that they existed either. So some of them are text therapy. So you don't even have to see the person, but you can just text, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. And that therapist can text back to you. There's even one, and they swear this is helpful. It is a bot. It is a bot therapist. So you're not even talking to a person. Obviously, it's algorithms for the response. But this woman talked about how helpful it was to just know that they weren't actually divulging all this to a person. And they really got something from this. I thought that was fascinating, because that never would occur to me that would be, helpful therapy. I think also things like what you're doing, people getting more access to talks like this that are very open, people having more access to therapists online, to teletherapy. There's just I think there's a lot of resources out there. And even though I'm an advocate, I certainly didn't know about some of these that I was reading about. And I just think that there's a lot of things out there. The problem is, for a lot of people, it takes initiation, it takes effort to do some of these things. And sometimes when you're really struggling, you don't have that capability. And again, that's why if you're really struggling, to find someone to help you that can be your advocate, that can get out there and kind of surf through these things and find the right thing for you would be really helpful. But I just think there's so many things that have come along in the last couple of years that didn't exist before that can be really helpful. And I really appreciate what you're doing, because I think just people hearing our conversation, it might spark something for them, and just, to have that courage just to stand up and say, yeah, I need help.
Well, thank you. That really does mean a lot. One other thing I'll just throw out there, Angel, is things like the heart support forums. That's something that without the internet, it wouldn't be there at all. Like, yeah, you would still have a suicide helpline that you could call. Yeah, you would still have maybe, some resources at the school. You would still have mental health professionals. But things like a peer support forum, where it's just other people who have maybe been through something similar, and you can post anonymously and get help anonymously. You can do it through text. You can do it through whatever you want. That's something that I think just the internet makes so many things possible. Some are good, some are bad. I think that is a really good one. And all of these things, the chat bot that you were talking about reminds me of Friend Tales, which we were talking about last week, which is still in development. But if you're not familiar with that, let me grab their website again. They're a mental health startup, and it's mental health characters for kids. So not applicable to your kids now, but just something they're talking to. Whenever we were talking, we talked about a bot that they're developing for kids with depression, anxiety, OCD, self-esteem issues, addiction, those kinds of things. And it was just one of those that's kind of similar to what she said. She said it's just something to let them know, hey, here's somewhere you can talk. That's a safe space. And
and you have something that's going to respond to you in an appropriate manner, and really help you get connected to whatever you need to get connected to, if the bot feels like that's what you need. Otherwise, you're just going to be able to kind of dump into it. So if you haven't checked that out before, chat, I'll put a link to that in there too. But you can also check out the VOD from last week. Eventually it'll be on the podcast. Eventually it'll be on the YouTube channel, but she was great too.
Oh, good.
Well, I'm just going to open it up to you, and guys, if there's anything you guys want to ask and you haven't asked it already in chat, please go ahead and do that now. But Tracy, I'll open it up to you and just say, is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to mention, plug, discuss, resources, sites, anything?
Yeah. There's one thing that I definitely want to make sure I mention for people out there. This is a book. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's by Charlie Mackesy. It's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And you can tell by all my marks how much I love it. It is full of wisdom. It's full. I mean, it seems like a kid's book, but it definitely, I mean, it could be, but it's also meant for adults. And I was reading it, and one of the quotes says, "Asking for help isn't giving up. It's refusing to give up." And when I read that, the first time I read it, I almost just burst into tears, because I just thought of my son, and I thought of all these people who feel like if I ask for help, it's a weakness. And no, it's a strength. It is the strongest thing you can do. And asking for help is not giving up. It's refusing to give up. And that's just one quote. And the whole book is amazing. And so if you're looking for something that you can just pick up and put down or read with your kids, it's a great book. He's British, and he's on Instagram, and he's coming out with another book and probably something that's animated, but it is just so hopeful and so beautiful, and it's full of wisdom. So I had to mention that.
Absolutely. Well, I put a link to that one in here also. And Bite says, I want to say thanks for being here and sharing your time and info. And then also says, do we get a list of where your tabs are for that book?
You know what? I swear, I think it's every single page. And across the top is these are all good, but these are the best. I know. Isn't that funny?
That's awesome.
It would take you probably 30 minutes to read the entire book. It is just little snippets of, it's great. Anyway.
That's great. Well, y'all check out that book for sure. There's a link to it right there in chat. So you can click on that and go look at it on Goodreads. And if you want to buy it, you buy from wherever you want to buy it.
Yeah. Again, not a paid promotion.
Yes, right.
It's just something that I love. Yeah.
I know. I always try, whenever people mention books and stuff, I always go to Goodreads and get the Goodreads link so that people can make that decision on their own.
Yep. But he's on Instagram, and he posts new pictures and new quotes. And so it's just, if you're looking for something kind of hopeful, it's great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody that joined. I'm thrilled that you're doing this, and that you have people that are listening and hopefully spreading the word, so that we can, as a community, rid the world of the shame and stigma that surround mental health. So thank you.
Amen. Bite says, a small joy for me is finding secondhand books where people have marked pages or made notes or highlighted. It's fascinating to see what other people get from the same text. Yes, absolutely. Angel says, thank you for being here. Bomb says, thank you very much. Tracy, really appreciate this. So yes, absolutely. Echo all of those. We'll chat.
Thank you for joining us today on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I hope this episode has been as enlightening and inspiring for you as it has been for me. It's truly wonderful to have listeners like you who care about these essential conversations and want them to keep going. I also want to express my heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guest, Tracy Hargen. Her wisdom and passion for mental health advocacy shine through in every word, and I'm sure her insights have touched many hearts today. But remember, our journey doesn't end here. It continues every day as we learn, grow, and support one another. We're all part of a community of kindness and understanding, and your participation is an essential piece of that puzzle. As parents, caregivers, or individuals who want to make a positive impact on others, you're not alone. The path to nurturing kids' mental health can be complex, but it's a path that's worth every step. And just like Tracy shared, asking for help is a sign of strength, and reaching out to support one another is the cornerstone of progress. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear from you. So feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with me on social media or through our website, tacosfallapart.org. If you've resonated with today's episode and found something that can benefit someone you know, don't hesitate to share it with them. And if you found this episode helpful, please consider leaving a review or rating on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps me reach many more people. Together, we can create a world with less stigma and more compassion when it comes to mental health. Stay connected with me for more engaging episodes and information. I am MommaFoxFire on all socials. This podcast is all about learning, growing, and spreading empathy. If you'd like to learn more about Tracy Hargen or explore the resources we mentioned, you can find the links in the show notes below. As always, thank you for your time, your support, and for being part of this growing community. Let's make the world a more understanding and compassionate place, one episode at a time.